In a sense, it does not exist. A different model of the text, in textualizing reality from a different standpoint, would have let some aspects of reality in and disallowed other aspects. The text in question would be something else, something different. None of this is either an arbitrary or a subjective activity. So when a student says, no, it is not all this subjective, you still have to do something to prove your point of view. It's not just the opposite of objective, which is random, arbitrary, idiosyncratic. I can say anything that you want. No, you can't, pal. And then methodology kicks in. So whether we invoke the Rashomon effect or Browning's The Ring of the Book, we can safely say that the humanities, we can safely say that the humanities opens up the text as a site for ongoing contestation among different perspectives, ideologies, and reading practices, rather than use the text as a site of monologic and prescriptive closure. The literary way of knowing undoes, deconstructs, if you will, the trans-interpretive claims of truth and instead opens up the text to the perennial play of interpretations. The undecidability of the text in literary studies is not an epistemological flaw, but rather a passionate invitation to the human subject to find jouissance in the tension between ambiguity and certitude, between the authority of naming and the abandon of namelessness, between the will to rectitude and an incorrigible errancy. I'm sure that much of this will sound dangerously ambiguous to certain positivist ears, but I will respond merely by saying that ambiguity is fine by us humanities scholars who take pride that, in fact, one of us even wrote a classic entitled 7 Types of Ambiguity. I will conclude my piece with a brief riff on a crucial theme that to my mind constitutes the singularity of the humanities, the relationship to reason. In what specific way are the humanities reasonable? Is reasonable the same thing as applicable? It is almost universally held that the studies in the humanities are not opportunistic, practical, instrumental. Precisely, that is the point of worthwhile literature, to defetishize the stranglehold of instrumental reason over the human subject. The Frankfurt School, by way of the immanent critique, tried indefatigably to question the tyranny of instrumental reason. The humanistic study of literature, which is nothing but an appreciated critique of the human condition in its myriad non-totalizable manifestations, makes the audacious diagnosis, sometimes in the name of Gelassenheit, or in the name of negative capability, or in the name of a perennial opposition to orthodoxy, be it that of culture or the system, but the hubris of instrumental reason is part of the problem and not of the answer. That last sentence was infelicitously long. Apologies. Whereas the mandate of instrumental reason is to reduce phenomena to a status of raw materiality, the ethic of literary understanding is to cultivate an attitude of polyvalent listening to processes of experience and boycott the project of meaning-making as colonization. It is no wonder then that to the literary imagination, meaning-making begins when instrumentality fails or is in crisis. When Brecht Samsa turned into a gigantic insect, Joseph K. becomes the anonymous and inexplicable victim of instrumental reason gone mad, and Bartleby prefers not to, and the underground narrator in Dostoevsky thumbs his nose at the Crystal Palace and secedes from the truth of 2 + 2 = 4, something real is at stake. Something as real as it is vulnerable. It requires the oppositional insight of literary imagination to recognize these strange characters as eye-sayers, not as nihilists, as visionary ushers of a new and uncomfortable truths rather than as losers. It will be remembered that phenomenology started out with a response to what Edmund Husserl understood as a crisis in the state of knowledge and the state of the human sciences. Again, the human sciences. The world of knowledge split in two: those who sought knowledge through verification, quantification, demonstrable propositionality, and the precision of mathematical and symbolic logic. And someone like Rudolf Carnap even said, expurgate those words which cannot be verified. And those who, in the name of life and the Lebenswelt, chose to talk about the Dasein, anxiety, dread, ontology, being and nothingness, and all the other stuff that constitutes existence, but cannot easily be parsed into demonstrable knowledge. Heidegger was bold enough to maintain that the humanities necessitated a different mode of inquiry than that of positivistic science or of canonical metaphysics that had chosen to make nothing of the nothing. The humanities in the age of corporate techno-capital are typically perceived as an address to nothing that is of any consequence. Should the humanities, in response to such a shattering characterization, redefine and reorient themselves in search of a proper something? Most certainly not. The integrity as well as the importance of the humanities lies in its visionary courage to think against the grain and invoke the nothing in the name of the ineffable. Aha! Did that sound like closure? Did it have a dying fall? I mean, did it seem like a sense of an ending? In some sense, I think, that's where the actual talk ends. And I had a couple of little coda suggesting a few questions off of that. I could do that now. Or Ian, you tell me, folks, if this is long enough, and I'm happy to open it out to Q&A and comments and whatever. So,
I'd be interested to hear.
Okay, I'll just make it. You're all with me still? Not anesthetized, not bored to death, not bored to. Okay, fine. Here are some of the, talking around some of these themes. First issue is the question of, I was telling one of my very dear and close friends who was an extremely successful, CEO of a company, and and we shared a lot of issues. And I said, I'm giving this talk. He was alarmed, and the reason was, how dare you, Radha? Talk about humanities, but don't invoke corporate capital. And I said, look, pal, you are not Mr. Capital, not I am humanities. I'm just one little professor, so I don't embody the humanities. And nor are you. The apotheosis is something called corporate capital. So the issue that I'm raising here is, in this characterization, have I in any sense overstated the distinction between, the sciences and the humanities? On the one hand, there is a relationship of reciprocity and recognition, but as well as reciprocity and antagonism. So we need to get into those issues and partly what was behind my friend's anxiety was, he thought maybe he hadn't read the talk, maybe I was doing something ugly and invidious by suggesting that there was a nasty incommensurability between the us and the them. So his concern was, we shouldn't talk about it in terms of they are doing their thing, I'm doing my thing, but in some sense look for common ground. So maybe we can come back to that. So where are we looking at common ground? And is common ground, discoverable non-methodologically? So back again to questions of methodology. If people are separated in the way they think, points of view, we do say stuff like an academic point of view, a professorial point of view, a corporate point of view, a managerial point of view, certain ways of thinking. And these ways of thinking are nurtured, inculcated by what we do professionally. So to that extent, clearly, there is a connection between the way we look at life in general. Some people are problem solvers, some people are not. Typically, my paper will have a bunch of questions. Do you know the answers? No, I don't. I'm sharing with you a bunch of questions. So that is something I want to get into. If indeed the world is shareable as a phenomenon, as a symptom, as a promise to be fulfilled in the future, and at the same time methodologically mediated, what then can we do? It's sort of the Tower of Babel question in a certain way. The same reality, but accessible through different languages. So that was the concern, behind my friend's anxiety beyond the initial fear of being misrecognized. So one is misrecognition, the other is the question of a common project, but available only through methodology. And maybe we could talk about something like methodology. What should it